I never believed in curses, not when I was a kid, not when I was a teenager, and certainly not when I became an adult. Ghost stories were just campfire fuel, nothing more. At least that's what I thought until the summer of 2019. I had just graduated college, broke and exhausted, when I saw an online listing for a ridiculously cheap rental house on the outskirts of a small town in Pennsylvania. The photos showed a two-story farmhouse, old but charming, surrounded by trees and fields. The price was so low, it almost felt like a mistake. The ad only had one sentence under description: long-term tenant preferred. Must not mind the history of the house. I laughed when I read it. The history of the house. Every old building has a history. If some previous owner died there, who cares? People die everywhere. 2 weeks later, I was signing the lease. When I first pulled up to the house, I remember the uneasy silence, not peaceful silence, the kind of silence that presses on your eardrums, like the air itself doesn't want you there. The paint on the house was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the windows, well, that's what really caught me. Every window was spotless, gleaming as if they'd just been scrubbed. Yet behind the glass, the rooms looked darker than they should have been. The landlord, a tall, thin man named Mr. Reeves, barely spoke as he handed me the keys. His eyes never quite met mine. Before leaving, he muttered something under his breath. Don't feed the house. I thought I misheard him. Feed the house? By the time I turned to ask what he meant, his car was already disappearing down the dirt road. That first night, I barely unpacked. I set up my bed, threw some clothes in the closet, and tried to convince myself the creaks and groans of the house were just old wood settling. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. I froze, holding my breath. The sound stopped right outside my bedroom door. I whispered, "Hello?" Silence. I forced myself out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the smell hit me. Damp earth, like freshly dug soil. When I checked the floorboards, there was nothing. No footprints, no dirt, just the dark hallway, stretching into silence. I didn't sleep again that night. The first warning. The next morning, I went into town to grab groceries. At the diner, when I mentioned where I was staying, the waitress stopped mid-pour with my coffee. "You're in the Reeves house?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why?" Her face tightened, like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Finally, she leaned in and whispered, "Don't let it in." I frowned. "Don't let what in?" But she just shook her head and walked away. Back at the house, I tried to shake off the weird warning. Small towns love their ghost stories, right? But still, I couldn't get her voice out of my head. That evening, while unpacking, I found something strange in the closet of the master bedroom. Behind a row of loose boards, tucked away in a hollow space, there was a small wooden box. It was old, maybe 100 years or more, and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Inside were yellowed scraps of paper, each with a different word written in faded ink. Some were names, others were dates, and one, written in larger, bolder letters, said, "Don't feed the house." My stomach sank. Those were the exact words the landlord had mumbled. I shoved the box back where I found it, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. The second night, that night, the sounds returned. Not just footsteps this time, but whispers, low, rasping voices that seemed to seep through the walls themselves. I pressed my ear against the plaster, heart pounding, and I swear I heard my name. Daniel. The way it said it, stretched out, hungry, I stumbled back, locking the bedroom door even though I knew it wouldn't help. The whispers grew louder, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the voices. At exactly 3:15 a.m., every light in the house flickered on by itself. The next morning, I was outside when I noticed an old woman standing at the edge of the property, watching me. She wore a heavy shawl, even though it was summer, her pale eyes fixed on the house. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly when I approached. "Look, if this is about the rent," I started. She cut me off. "The house eats what it's given. Always has." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "You'll find out. Everyone does. Just don't open the door when it knocks." Before I could ask more, she turned and hobbled away. The third night, I stayed awake, determined not to sleep. By midnight, I was sitting in the living room with every lamp on, gripping a kitchen knife, like it would save me. Around 1:30, I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds against the front door. I froze. My mind screamed at me to stay quiet. But something deeper, something inside me, wanted to answer it, like an itch under my skin, an unbearable pull. The knocking came again, louder, and then a voice. "Daniel, open the door." It wasn't a whisper this time. It was my mother's voice. But my mother had been dead for 6 years. I sat there shaking, staring at the door, knife trembling in my hand. The house was testing me. The voice outside the door sounded exactly like my mother. Her tone, her inflection, even the way she used to call my name when I stayed out too late. "Daniel, sweetheart, it's me. Let me in." My chest tightened. For a split second, I almost believed it. Almost. But then I remembered the grave, the funeral, the way her coffin was lowered into the ground. "No," I whispered, gripping the knife tighter. The doorknob began to turn slowly, rattling against the lock. My pulse roared in my ears. I forced myself not to move, not to make a sound. Then, silence. I thought maybe it was gone, until I noticed the smell. That same damp earth, stronger now, seeping under the doorframe, the stench of open graves. I backed away, step by step, until I was at the far end of the living room. I didn't sleep at all that night. Research. By the next day, fear had twisted into obsession. I needed answers. I went to the town library and searched old newspapers for any mention of the house. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the last 150 years, every family that had lived there suffered strange tragedies. Children vanished from their beds. Parents were found dead with no explanation. Entire families disappeared overnight. Locals whispered about the house that feeds. There was even a faded black and white photo of the house from the 1920s. In the upstairs window, something was staring out. Not a person, not exactly. Its face was stretched too wide, its eyes like pits of ink. When I showed the librarian the picture, she snapped the book shut. "You need to leave," she said sharply, "before it chooses you. The house takes something." That night, I double-checked every lock, every window. I barricaded the front door with a chair, but at 2:43 a.m., I woke to a crash. The chair I had wedged under the doorknob was splintered on the floor. The front door stood wide open. Heart hammering, I ran through the house, searching for an intruder, but no one was inside. Nothing was missing, except my phone. It was gone, completely gone, and in its place, on the kitchen table, was a Polaroid photo that hadn't been there before. The photo showed me, asleep in my bed, but the picture wasn't from last night. In the corner of the photo, written in shaky handwriting, was the date, tomorrow's date. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that Polaroid until the edges crumpled under my grip. Me, asleep, the date marked tomorrow. I tore the photo in half and threw it in the trash. But when I went back upstairs, the picture was lying on my pillow, perfectly whole. My skin crawled. It wasn't just watching me, it was showing me that it could do whatever it wanted. I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like it was leaning closer, listening, waiting. The next morning, the old woman was back at the edge of my yard. I stormed over, the photo clutched in my fist. What is happening in that house? I demanded. She didn't look surprised. In fact, she didn't look at me at all. Her eyes were locked on the house, as if she refused to meet its gaze. It wants you, she said softly. It always wants someone, but it doesn't take all at once. It eats slowly, piece by piece. I shoved the photo toward her. This, what the hell is this? Her lips pressed thin. It's showing you the trade. It takes a night of your life, then another, until you're gone, until there's nothing left but the house. I felt the blood drain from my face. How do I stop it? Finally, her eyes flicked to mine. You don't feed it. And with that, she turned and walked away. That night, I nailed the window shut. I pushed furniture against the doors. I sat in the living room with every light blazing, gripping a baseball bat instead of a knife. At exactly 3 a.m., I heard it again, knocking, but not just at the front door, at the back door, at the windows, at the walls, like the whole house was alive, pulsing, demanding. Then, voices, not just my mother's this time, my father's, my best friend's, even my own voice, calling out from the dark. Daniel, let us in. Please, please, we're cold. We're hungry. I pressed my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth. It's not real. It's not real. The lights flickered, the air grew heavy, and then I smelled it again. That stench of damp earth, stronger than ever. When I opened my eyes, the walls were bleeding, thick, black liquid oozing down the wallpaper in slow rivulets, dripping onto the floorboards. I screamed and stumbled back, but when I blinked, it was gone. The walls were clean. The only thing left was a single Polaroid lying at my feet. This one showed me sitting in the living room, baseball bat in hand, but behind me, something tall and eyeless loomed in the shadows, and the date written on the corner, that very night. I didn't want to look at the Polaroid again, but I couldn't stop myself. The thing behind me, it wasn't human. It was impossibly tall, its head brushing the ceiling, its arms too long, too thin. Its face, or the lack of one, was nothing but pale skin, stretched smooth, except for a mouth too wide, a mouth that smiled. My throat closed up. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. Nothing, empty shadows, but the air had changed. Heavier, watching. I shoved the Polaroid in a drawer and swore not to look at it again. But part of me already knew it didn't matter. The house wanted me to see. The blackout. On the fifth night, the power went out. I sat in suffocating darkness, the silence broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Then, the sound of breathing. Not mine. Deep, ragged breaths coming from the corner of the room. Who's there? I whispered. though I already knew the answer. The breathing stopped, and then the clock struck 3. I felt it before I saw it, a shift in the air, like something huge moving through the room. My flashlight flickered, and for the briefest second, it landed on it. That faceless thing crouched in the corner, its long fingers pressed into the floorboards, its head tilted too far to the side, listening. When the light went out, I ran. I bolted upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, and pressed my back against it. My heart hammered so violently I thought it would burst. For hours, I sat there, waiting, but nothing came. Nothing touched the door. When morning light finally bled through the curtains, I found another Polaroid under the door. This one showed me, huddled against the wood, terror on my face, and in the photo, the faceless thing was crouched, just inches behind me. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove into town, straight to the landlord's office. Mr. Reeves looked startled to see me. His eyes darted around, like he expected someone, or something, to be watching. "You stayed 5 nights," he muttered. "That's more than most. What is it?" I demanded. "What's in that house?" His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "Not what? Who?" I leaned closer. "Then tell me." He exhaled smoke and whispered, "The house isn't alive. It's a cage. And what you saw? That's what it keeps inside. It can't leave unless it's invited. Unless you feed it." My stomach turned. "And the photos?" Reeves crushed the cigarette into the ashtray. "Those are its way of showing you what's next. A promise." I felt cold all over. "Then how do I break it?" He gave a humorless laugh. "You don't. The house always gets fed, one way or another. The 6th night. That night, I didn't try to fight it. I drank until I passed out, thinking maybe unconsciousness would shield me. It didn't. I woke to the sound of the camera shutter clicking in the dark. Click, click, click. Each flash illuminated the room for a split second, and each time, the faceless thing was closer, at the foot of my bed, at the side of the mattress, until the last flash lit up its smile, inches from my face, and then darkness. When I opened my eyes, daylight spilled across the room. The camera was gone, the faceless thing was gone, but on the nightstand, waiting for me, was a neat stack of Polaroids. I didn't want to look. I already knew what they would show. But I looked anyway. Photo after photo of me sleeping, my mouth open, my body twisted in restless dreams, and in every single one, the thing was closer, watching, waiting. The last photo was blank, not white, black, completely black, except for faint scratches across the surface, like fingernail marks clawing to get out. I shoved the pictures into a drawer and slammed it shut. That's when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from inside the drawer. By now, every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave. Just get in the car, drive, never look back. But when I went to grab my keys, they weren't there. I tore the house apart, searching the kitchen counters, the living room, the bedside table. Nothing. When I opened the fridge, out of desperation, my blood ran cold. My car keys were sitting on the top shelf, resting neatly on a plate. Next to them was another Polaroid. This one showed me opening the fridge, the date scribbled in the corner. That very moment, I dropped the photo and slammed the fridge shut. I told myself I would stay awake. I told myself I would fight, but exhaustion drags you down no matter how much you resist. Somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, I dozed off in the armchair, bat clutched in my hands. I woke to the sound of a door creaking open. But it wasn't the front door. It was the bedroom closet. Slowly, it swung wider, though I hadn't touched it. Inside was only darkness, too much darkness, like the closet wasn't a closet anymore, but a tunnel leading somewhere far below. And from within that blackness came the sound of wet, dragging footsteps. Something was climbing out. I ran upstairs, slamming the closet shut behind me, my heart rattling my ribs. When I reached the bedroom, another Polaroid was waiting on the pillow. This one showed the closet door wide open and something halfway through. By now, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Every time I blinked, the house seemed to shift. Hallways stretched longer. Doors appeared where there hadn't been any. Sometimes I would hear laughter behind the walls. Sometimes I'd catch movement in the mirrors. And always that smell, damp earth, graves. I tried to call for help using the landline, but the moment I picked up the receiver, a voice whispered back, my own voice, "Don't fight it. You're already part of the house." I threw the phone against the wall and screamed. By the 8th day, the house had begun to shift. Doors no longer led where they should. The bathroom sometimes opened into the basement. The hallway upstairs stretched longer every time I walked it. The wallpaper repeating itself like a loop. Once, I opened a door, expecting the kitchen, and found the woods outside. But when I stepped through, the trees weren't real. They were painted on walls, flat, endless murals. The house wasn't just watching me, it was changing me. I started forgetting things. My own memories felt borrowed. When I looked in the mirror, my reflection didn't always move in sync. Sometimes it just stared at me, head tilted, like it was waiting for me to slip. Avoided the upstairs guest room, but one night I heard whispers seeping from under the door. They weren't random, they were chanting. I pressed my ear to the wood, and the voices became clearer. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel," I snapped back, my chest tightening. The whispers grew louder until they were pounding against my skull. Finally, I threw the door open. The room was empty, but the bed was perfectly made, and on the pillow sat another Polaroid. This one showed me standing right there, ear pressed to the door. But in the photo, the door behind me was already open, and something pale was crawling out. On the 9th morning, I heard a knock at the front door. Not the heavy, unnatural knocking from before. This was lighter, human. Through the window, I saw the old woman. Relief surged through me. Someone real, someone alive. I yanked the door open, desperate for help. Her eyes widened in horror. "No," she gasped. "Why did you open it?" I froze. "What?" She didn't step inside. She only pointed behind me. Slowly, I turned. The hallway was darker than it had ever been, shadows pooling, stretching, and in the center, something tall and thin waited, smiling without a face. When I spun back toward the woman, she was already gone. The door was closed, and I didn't remember shutting it. By nightfall, stains began appearing on the walls, black, oily shapes that looked like hands pressed into the wallpaper. I scrubbed at them until my knuckles bled, but they wouldn't fade. In fact, the harder I scrubbed, the clearer they became, like the house wanted me to see them. By midnight, the stains had spread across the entire hallway. Handprints, fingernails, outlines of faces pressing through the walls, mouths stretched open in silent screams. I stumbled back, clutching my head. "It's not real, it's not real." But then one of the faces moved. Its mouth opened wider, and it whispered my name. I used to think fear was just in the mind, that if you convinced yourself the dark was empty, the shadows harmless, the creaks and groans of an old house only would sati not. Since I met thee, it began 3 years ago, after I accepted a caretaker job at an abandoned mining town in northern Nevada. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous, just lonely. The town had been shut down in the 1970s after a series of cave-ins, but the land still technically belonged to the mining company, and they wanted someone on site to keep away Van. The pay was good. I was broke, and the idea of spending a few months in the desert, cut off from the noise of the world, sounded almost Pita. The town was called Greystone. You won't find it on most maps. A handful of buildings still stood when I arrived: an old saloon, a sheriff's office, the miners' barracks, a church with its steeple snapped in half, and a scattering of houses so weather-beaten they looked like the desert had swallowed almost everything. Sand filled the streets, covered porches, pushed against doors. It felt less like a town. The company gave me a small house at the edge of the settlement. It had running water, a generator for power, and a shortwave radio to check in with once a week. Otherwise, it was just me, the desert, and the ghosts of the past. For the first few weeks, nothing happened. I fixed broken windows, patched roofs, kept the place from falling into total ruin. I walked the empty streets at sunset and tried to imagine the sound of laughter, boots on a wooden sidewalks, piano music spilling from the saloon. But no matter how hard I tried, Greystone never felt like it had belonged to the living. The silence was too heavy, the shadows too long. And then, one night, I heard them. It was close to midnight. I was lying in bed when a sound drifted through the window, faint but unmistakable. Children laughing. I sat up, heart pounding. At first I thought maybe it was the wind or coyotes. But no, these were voices, dozens of them, carrying through the night air. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The desert stretched in all directions, empty and black. The town lay silent, but the laughter, it was coming from the church. I told myself I'd imagined it. That's what I wanted to believe. But when I closed the door and turned back toward my bed, something stopped me. The church bell rang. It was rusted, broken, hadn't worked in decades, but I heard it clearly, echoing through the night, and with it came whispers, not from outside, from the walls of my house. The next morning, I searched the church. Inside, dust lay thick on every surface. Pews collapsed, hymnals rotted, sunlight cutting through holes in the roof. Nothing alive had been there in years. But on the altar sat something that hadn't been there before. A doll, handmade, its head stuffed with straw, button eyes stitched on crookedly. Its mouth was sewn shut with black thread. I didn't touch it. I just backed out slowly and locked the church doors behind me. That night, the whispers returned. They came from the corners of my room, from beneath the floorboards, from behind the closet door. I pressed my palms over my ears, but still I heard them, hungry, cold, hollow. The next morning, the doll was gone. From then on, Greystone wasn't empty anymore. I started seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows darting between buildings, figures standing at the edge of the desert, gone when I blinked. At night, the laughter came back, sometimes followed by weeping, sometimes by screams. I tried the radio, desperate for another voice, but every time I spoke into it, all I got was static, and buried in that static, faint and distorted, were my own words repeating back to me, not in my voice, Something was mimicking me. The first time I saw one up close was in the barracks. I'd gone in to nail plywood over the windows, but the air inside was colder than outside, sharp enough to sting my skin. My breath misted. In the far corner, something crouched. It looked human, at least at first. Pale skin stretched too thin over its frame, ribs jutting like knives. Its limbs were too long, its hands ending in blackened fingers that scraped the floor, and where its face should have been, hollow, just a void. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, only an emptiness that seemed to drink in the light. It turned its head toward me, anyway, as if it saw. I ran. I don't remember how I got out of that building. One moment, it was crouched in the corner. The next, it was at the doorway, its faceless head tilted. I stumbled into the sunlight, gasping. It didn't follow. The hollow ones never stepped into the sun. After that, I stopped going out at night. I locked the doors, boarded the windows, sat with my flashlight until the batteries died. But the hollow ones came anyway. I woke one night to find 3 of them in my room. They didn't walk in. They were just there, crouched at the foot of my bed, their hollow faces tilted, their long fingers twitching. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. One of them leaned closer. Its skin smelled of earth, of graves. And from that emptiness, where its mouth should have been, a voice poured out. My mother's voice. "Why did you leave me, Daniel?" It whispered. My chest seized. My mother had been dead for years. The second leaned in, its hollow face pressing close to mine. This time, it was my own voice. "You can't leave," it said. And the third said nothing. It only placed one long finger against my chest, right over my heart. Cold burned through me. My vision swam. When I woke, they were gone. But on the floor beside my bed was another doll, this one sewn from scraps of my own clothes. I stopped sleeping after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them breathing. Every time I turned off the lights, I saw them waiting in the dark. I tried to leave Greystone. I packed my truck, started the engine, drove as fast as I could. But the road never ended. The desert stretched on forever. Sand and rocks and sky. Hours passed. The sun burned overhead. The gas tank dropped to empty. But I never left. When I finally stopped, I realized I was back at Greystone, the town waiting, the hollow ones watching from the shadows of the buildings. I never left. I don't know how long I've been here now. Weeks, months, years, maybe. Time doesn't work the same anymore. The hollow ones don't want me dead. Not yet. They want me emptied, hollowed out. They take my memories first. I can feel them slipping away, like pages torn from a book. Faces I should know fade to nothing. My own reflection no longer looks like me. Soon, I think, there will be nothing left. And when that happens, I'll join them. Another shadow in the ruins of Greystone, another hollow one. And if you ever find this, if you ever hear my voice, don't believe it's me. Because once they take you, once you become hollow, you'll say anything to bring the next one in.